Okay, everybody, thanks for joining us this afternoon as we talk about the JET program in general and the 2022 application in particular. To begin with, my name is Ty. I was a JET myself for 3 years. So from 2007 until 2010, I lived in a small town in Kagawa Prefecture, which is right where that red dot is on the map down there in southern Japan. Taught at a junior high and some elementary schools down there, again, for 3 years before eventually coming back to North America to go to graduate school, moving to Nashville, and starting work at the Consulate General of Japan in Nashville back in 2015. So I've been in my current role, which includes JET program coordinator since 2015, about 6 years at this point. We're also really privileged to have a current JET on the call with us. Claire?
Hi, my name is Claire Hopkins. I am currently placed in Hiroshima. I'm in a small mountain town in the northern part of the prefecture, and I am a senior high school ALT, and I go between 3 different schools, and I teach at my base school 3 times a week, and then I have a visit school on Tuesday and a visit school on Wednesday.
And I know that this is a Kentucky-focused information session. You're from Kentucky. Where did you go to school?
I'm from Kentucky. I went to Western Kentucky University. I'm from the Bowling Green area.
Awesome. Thank you. We also have Tucker on the call, who's a recently returned JET alumni. I don't know if you want to introduce yourself really quick, Tucker. Can't hear you. Still can't hear you. No worry. Okay, I'll just so Tucker's up in the Lexington area, came back last year from the JET program. And if we can get his mic up and running, then we'll have him included in the Q&A part when we get around to that. So about the JET program. First of all, JET is an acronym. It stands for Japan Exchange and Teaching Program. I think most people, when they think of JET, are thinking of Japan. That's where you're going. All the JET participants are folks who get sent to go work over in Japan. The teaching component also jumps out to people. You're, for the most part, working in the school system over in Japan. But I think equally important, at least equally important, is the exchange element. The idea is that we're taking people from all over the world. We're taking people from Kentucky, moving them to these small towns and larger towns in Japan, with the expectation that in addition to teaching English, to working, that they will share their culture, share their experiences with their host community. And at the same time that they'll take the time to learn from their host community so that when they do eventually come back to the US, like the vast majority of JETs do, they'll be able to come back and share their experiences with their friends and family here in the US and to help build those kind of grassroots bonds between the American people and the Japanese people. Claire, I know, I'm from Tennessee, born and raised in Tennessee. Everybody associated the state with the Tennessee Waltz, first and foremost for some reason, which is an old timey song. And then I think Jack Daniels was probably the number 2 thing that popped to mind. What do people associate? I think I know the number 1, but what do people associate Kentucky with?
KFC. Immediately. As soon as I say that I'm from Kentucky, they want to talk about KFC, which they call KFC here Kentucky. So that's it. That's what they know. Sometimes they know a little bit about bourbon, but usually it's just the fast food restaurant.
And KFC is actually a bit different in Japan. Like it's a big Christmas thing, isn't it?
Yeah. People are making reservations for their Christmas chicken like now. They've probably started making their reservations already.
Yeah,
It's a huge deal.
it's funny whenever you like, I remember like I would tell my kids in Japan that like we didn't do Christmas chicken in the US, and it was mind blown because
Yeah.
the advertising in Japan, like that's the thing you do. You're celebrating Christmas, you get your chicken.
Yeah, I'm the same. We don't do Christmas chicken, but here they do. And it's very confusing to my students that I don't reserve my own special whole chicken for myself each year that I'm here.
So what have you done to try and enlighten your students? How do you share Kentucky with folks who primarily associate it with a fast food chain?
Yeah. I my students, and especially an adult class that I teach, they're very interested in Kentucky, and they will go in and Google just Kentucky just to see what comes up. And a lot of them will come back to me and just ask me, why are there no mountains? Why is it so flat? And it looks very different from where I'm at in Kentucky or in Japan, which is just, tons of mountains and ski resorts. It's very different. So um, I usually, as the years go on, I bring up things that are happening in Kentucky at that time. For example, like in May, I like to talk about the Kentucky Derby. I like to show, pictures and explain to them what it is, because I was surprised a little bit, but they know nothing about the Kentucky Derby. And so I get to explain to them what it is, like what people do there, like the point of it. I like to show them music that got its start in Kentucky, and different foods. When there's holidays and stuff, I like to bake, bourbon balls, for example, introduce them to foods that are really popular. And with my coworkers, when we go out for drinks, or well, when we did pre-pandemic, it always came up, if there was Kentucky bourbon on the table or like it as an option to drink, it would be like, oh, Claire, do you know this bourbon? Like, have you had it before? And I'm like, yeah, it comes from Kentucky. Like we make it there. So there's lots of opportunities that come up that like I don't plan for at all, and it's just like really easy to fit into the conversation.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so I mean, and I think that is something to keep in mind for anyone who's thinking of going over on the JET program. Like right now, like in Kentucky, look for interesting aspects about your culture that you can share with folks over in Japan, because they may primarily associate it with fast food.
Yeah. And then just anything is good. Sometimes I think to myself, like, I lived in Kentucky for 23 years before I came to Japan, and I'm like, what do we do there? Like, you forget about things being over here. I'm like, what did I do for 23 years? So like anything you can bring, or like just jot down in your notes if you think about it, like do that, because when you get here, you might come across thinking like, I don't remember my culture 110% anymore.
Yeah, you're as your number of experiences and like inputs kind of increase, like it's harder to keep track of everything.
Yeah, definitely.
So just a little bit about the JET program for folks who might not know too much. First of all, it's a Japanese government run program that's been around for over 30 years. In that time, we've sent over 70,000 people over there to participate on JET. It's a paid full-time job, so this isn't a study abroad program. It's not a volunteer program, which is great. It means that you're actually getting paid a living wage and you can do fun adult stuff with the money that you're making. But it's also important to keep in mind for anyone who's done a study abroad or something like that in the past. Generally speaking, with a study abroad, you're paying someone to look after you, to be over there in Japan studying. On this occasion, on JET, you're the one being paid, so the responsibility kind of shifts a little bit. And we do expect everyone who's over there on JET to represent themselves, to represent their country and the program in a professional manner. It's a chance for, an international adventure before going on to graduate school or a long-term career. That was my experience. At least I was pretty sure I wanted to go to graduate school when I finished college, but I wasn't. I decided I wasn't quite ready to jump directly into it. So I started looking for kind of fun things to do in the meantime, and JET was the one I chose. I don't know, Claire, do you have any post-JET plans yet?
Yeah, well, I do have some post-JET plans, and as you guys will learn, if you start going through the process, you have to decide in December of like your previous year if you're going to recontract for the next August to August term. So it's only October, but I'm already thinking like, what am I going to be doing starting August 2022? So I also have plans to go to grad school. When I first applied for JET and got in, I wasn't 100% sure what the after plans would be, but I was just really interested in going abroad and like living in another culture. So that was my main reason for joining the JET program. And then as I've figured things out, I've decided like grad school is my next adventure, I guess.
That's great. Yeah, it's always good to have a solid plan. And you'll find that for anyone who's looking at the JET program, the thing that you plan to do before you go on JET may be different than what you actually end up doing. I think, Clara, you kind of found out about the JET program, got advised by Dr. Youngblood, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and Dr. Youngblood, I remember her telling me once that her plan was to go to law school, but she was always going to be a lawyer. And after JET, just swapped around, became a linguist professor. So
yes, very good at her job too. But yeah, definitely for me too. I had some ideas, but definitely not the direction that I'm planning to go for grad school now. So things can completely change.
that's the benefit of taking a little break and getting an outside perspective, right?
Yeah, yes, for sure.
There are two positions that we hire people for on the JET program. The first is the assistant language teacher or ALT position. That's what I did. That's what Claire is doing right now. ALTs generally are teaching anywhere from elementary school to senior high school, even though I have had people that work in Yochien in kindergartens from time to time. You might be at one school, you might be at a lot of different schools. Claire, you're saying that you were senior high school?
Yes, senior high school, 3 schools. Mm-hmm.
3 schools. And I was a junior high teacher with 6 elementary schools that I also went to. So this photo right here, this is actually of my junior high, Mitoyo Chugako up there on the hill. The photo was taken from just outside of my house, my apartment. So I was a really close commute to my main workplace. I went there every day, Monday through Friday, but then on Tuesdays and Thursday afternoons, I would go to one of 6 different elementary schools that fed into this junior high. In your case, it's all high schools.
Yeah. So from what I have noticed, if you are placed at a senior high school, you will only be at the senior high schools. Whereas if you are in elementary school or junior high school JET, like you can go between those 2 grade levels.
In a lot of cases, I think it's because those 2 grade levels are run at a more local level, whereas the high schools are run at a more professional wide level. So you've got different entities, different school boards, basically that you're working for.
Yep,
yeah.
I think so.
How far apart were your schools, or are your schools?
Yeah, I have to have a car. My base school, I can look out my window and see it. Mm-hmm. But my visit schools, one of them is 45 minutes away and the other one's about close to an hour away. So wow. Yeah, but that's not super typical of a situation from what I've noticed. It's usually much closer, but the senior high school JETs, the senior high school ALTs, they typically have a little bit longer travel times when they're going between schools than like junior high or elementary school.
Makes sense. Yeah, an hour, that's something. This photo that just popped in here, that was just me at one of my elementary schools my first year.
Aww.
Little kiddos.
Yeah.
When you're over there working as an ALT, guys, as the name would imply, you're an assistant language teacher. So you're there assisting the licensed Japanese teachers that are in the classroom. What that means is that, typically speaking, at least at the junior high and elementary school level, you're probably doing a lot more communication exercises, kind of motivating the students, playing some games, cultural exchange, much more than actual, grammar point kind of teaching. Claire, what in the senior high school, I know a lot of my friends that worked in senior high schools, there was more grammar involved. You were doing a bit more traditional teaching. Is that your experience? Or
yeah, I would say I do a bit more traditional teaching in that, like, I'm not so much an assistant as I am, like, I do a lot of the teaching with a Japanese teacher of English in the classroom with me, but it's not so much grammar based as Ty said. It's more you're kind of there to give them a reason to be interested in English, more so than like teaching them, what they need to learn to pass a standardized English proficiency test or something like that nature. So, a lot of my classes are just geared towards like, we try to have a lot of fun at I try to fit as much fun into 50 minutes as I can, because I also teach at a lower level school. Like, lower level schools, they're not high level. It's not a very strict educational environment. So luckily I have the freedom to kind of do what I want. And my students aren't necessarily going to use English. A lot of them may not even go to university, but just by having fun and like doing things in classes like that, they are interested to try to use English and, do their best. So that's the goal for me.
Yeah. And I think just to piggyback on what you're talking about, lower level school, for anyone who doesn't know, in Japan, compulsory education basically ends at junior high. So you don't have to go to high school. You need to apply and get into a high school. And so you'll find that there are the more elite academic schools where everyone who goes is going to, one of a handful of elite colleges. And then there's kind of the middle of the road schools. And then you have schools that might be a particular trade, like on the coast, like a fisherman's school or a farmer's school, where everyone's basically just spending a bit more time, getting a little bit more education, but the plan is that they're probably going to follow in the footsteps of, their dad or something like that. Similar. And yeah, typically at those high level schools, everyone's real interested in learning English and really motivated to learn English because they need to get into college. And at the lower level schools, you've got to work a little bit more harder and kind of make English a bit more fun to engage with them, because like you say, they're not going to need it in their actual career.
They won't.
The other position that we hire people for on the JET program is the Coordinator of International Relations, or CIR position. Only about 10% of all JETs go over as CIRs. These folks are working in government offices, doing really a pretty broad range of things, but almost certainly there is going to be some interpretation and translation involved in the work. And because of that, you need to have a fairly high proficiency level in Japanese to even apply for this position. You don't have to have taken the Japanese language proficiency test, but you should have a Japanese at least on par with an N2 for the CIR position. So I won't spend much time on this. I will say, the ALT position, again, you're going over as an assistant language teacher. So we're actually able to accept people without any Japanese language experience. Was that Claire? You went over with no
That was me. Yeah, that was me. I was one
You
of
didn't have a
those.
lot of education training, right? As I
Yeah.
recall.
Yeah. I had a lot of education training, zero Japanese training.
Um,
I am proof that you can do it. However, I strongly recommend um, take a take a class. Take at least one class before you come over. That's my strong recommendation. You can do it, but strong recommendation.
yeah, I was kind of the same. I had actually taken Japanese in high school, but I'd studied Italian in college. And so,
Oh,
it was probably a little better off than you when I got over there, but
you
not
for sure were.
not
You for
too.
sure were. I mean, I was like you guys can't imagine how little Japanese I knew. I did not, I didn't know how to write hiragana or katakana. I mean, I barely knew greetings. So you can do it, but I would recommend taking a class. And if you have any questions about where you could maybe do that, we can talk about that later too. So
Yeah. Of course, we talked about kind of in the classroom, what you're doing at work, but there is a lot that Jets are encouraged to do outside of the classroom. Some elements of it might actually be part of your job. So participating in school festivals or after school clubs, you might be asked to do that as part of your job, or you may just volunteer to do those kind of things. English clubs, that's another thing. I think, Claire, both you're teaching one now. I taught one when I was over there. What's your experience like?
yeah, it's so it's different at each of my schools. Like I have an English club. Like for one of the schools, we play a lot of games. We do a lot of like they love board games, and it's just an opportunity for them to like come and talk to me about whatever. And then at another school, their main focus is like they just want to have conversations because I'm only there once a week, so they don't really get any other opportunities living in this tiny countryside town to speak English with somebody whose first language is English. And then I also teach. I volunteer teach an adult class twice a month at our community center, and it's for adults, and it's really nice. It's maybe 12 to 15 like senior citizens they've been learning English. They've been a part of this class for like the last 30 years, and each ALT just teaches it. So if you get placed like in a small town, like a small countryside town, the chances are of you having an English class like that pretty high. And I really recommend that you like take the opportunity to teach it because you learn so much about the culture through that as well. Like they probably teach me more than I teach them, I would say, just because of the cultural aspect of it. I've learned like about rice farming. I've been invited to like traditional Japanese meals and like tea ceremonies. So if you were given that opportunity, I would highly recommend. It's really a great thing to be able to do for yourself and for your community. I mean, my community does so much for me, and that's like one small thing I can do to give back to them.
Yeah, it already existed. Like you got over there and someone basically reached out and invited you to participate. That was your experience. Yeah,
That's how that happened.
My town had, and down here at the bottom left, I've got a photo of my group, an Ikaiwa, an adult English club that met at the local community center and had been doing so for probably a decade before I came along. And they found out about me through my predecessor. She kind of put us in contact with each other. So they knew I was coming. They invited me out. And so my very first week in Japan, KG, the fellow in the blue shirt near the back in this photo, picked me up at my apartment and took me to a beer garden on top of the roof of a hotel in the nearest city. And they had a big welcome party for me. So this photo, I pulled off Facebook. That is from the very first get together with that group back in 2007. I left Japan in 2010, but I did go back in 2017 for a visit. So that's me in the blue shirt in the middle, my wife right behind me. We had just gotten married the year before, and this was the Ikaiwa. So I came back, I went to my old hometown, obviously, and met up with everybody, and they threw a big wedding, like a potluck party for me. So that was a lot of fun as well. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, keep in touch with them when you come back, Claire.
I
And it's
will.
easier, I think, to keep in contact with like a bunch of retirees than it is, young
Yeah.
they're much more likely to
I
respond to
have one. I'm sorry.
I said they're much more likely to respond to emails and messages, the retirees.
Yep.
I found,
Yep. Yes.
and more likely to still be there 10 years later.
Yep.
When you go on the
Yeah.
JET program, your initial interactions, if you're applying, are going to be through the consulate and through the JET program coordinator, through myself. We handle the recruiting, the selection process, preparing you guys to get on that plane. But when you actually get on that plane, when you actually get over to Japan, you're not working for the JET program. You're part of the JET program, but working for a specific contracting organization. And that's typically, a town, a school board, or a prefectural school board. I worked for a town school board teaching at junior high. Claire's at a prefectural school board. Maybe working for a city government, something like that. Each one of these contracting organizations is going to have slightly different requirements, slightly different expectations. So you will see that, everyone's contract might be slightly different, or their work experience is a little bit different. But in the next couple slides, we'll go over some stuff that kind of applies to everybody. The first thing is that when you agree to the JET program, you're agreeing to stay for basically 12 months, a 12-month period. You do have the ability, as long as you're doing a good job and your contracting organization is happy with your work and you want to stay, you typically get the option to recontract. Like Claire was saying, in December, I think, is when they start trying to push you to recontract. Sometimes they don't tell you this, but they actually have until February to get that definitive decision. So
they want that decision before you go on your your winter holiday. They want to decide, because my Board of Education, like, they have to have it known by January 5th. They say. I don't know how true that is, but
maybe that's an internal thing. But
yeah, I think so.
But yeah, so you do have the option, though, if you want to stay, to recontract and stay up to 5 years. So again, I did 3 years. Claire, I'm on
my
third year. What do you think? Are you coming back this coming year? Undecided?
Still undecided. Still undecided.
When you're over there working, you're contractually working for 35 hours a week. That's basically 35 hours at work. It's not 35 hours of actual teaching. So in my experience, the school is, and correct me if I'm wrong here, it's still 6 periods a day.
Yes.
And I would teach anywhere from 2 to 4 of those periods on a normal day. Is that kind of your experience, Claire? How many?
Yeah, I usually teach a minimum of 3 classes in a day. So I'd say it's pretty similar.
But when you're not teaching a class, you're generally back in the teacher room, you're at your desk, preparing or, doing something, but you're at work. You're not.
Yeah, I'm at work. And, sometimes I'll use that time to prepare lessons for, future classes. I'm lucky, and a lot of contracting organizations are okay with this. I'm able to study Japanese also a lot at work. My school is okay with me doing that. And a lot of schools are also okay with you doing that because, it's kind of expected. You learn the language, you also learn the culture better, and you're able to form better relationships both with your coworkers and the students. So that's generally what I do with my off time. I know some people, they like join, PE classes. Sometimes I go sit in the library. Just different things, keeping yourself busy. Just whatever you can do to keep yourself busy, really.
Yeah. You're working generally Monday through Friday, school hours.
Mm-hmm.
I finished every day at 3:45. What do you know? Well, obviously, what time do you clock out each day officially?
Yeah, my contract hours are 8:20 to 4:05, and I usually stay after a lot of days just because, to help with like speaking tests or my English club. Sometimes I join like our soccer club or the basketball club. Um, and you will find that like sometimes a handful of weekends out of the year, like there are activities going on such as sports festival or culture festival, or like maybe you're judging a speech contest where you will have to work on a Saturday or a Sunday, but you get that day back as well for like usually a day of your choosing. So um it's pretty easy hours, I would say, to
And then
work
you also have the paid time off. Everyone's
yeah.
guaranteed a minimum of 10 days a year. We were talking before the call, you actually get 21 days at your contracting organization, basically.
Yeah, I get 21 days of paid time off, and then I get 5 days of like, uh, I get 3 days of summer leave that have to be used between July and September, and then I get 2 days of welfare leave. That's just what it's translated as. We're not really sure exactly what it is, but it's just it's also 2 days paid time off. So 21 like paid time off holidays, and then 5 days of like other special leave that are also basically paid time off. So really cushy, really good. I think it's wonderful. Really,
I,
really
I
good.
I got 20 days when I was there, plus the 3 days for Oban, the summer holiday kind of.
That's surprising that you got Oban as a elementary, junior high school ALT.
Yeah, I guess you never know until you actually see your contract, and
Nope.
you may only get 10 days of PTO, but that's still that's 2 weeks, of
Yeah,
vacation. So.
definitely. I mean, you can do a lot. I know people who only get the 10 days and they fit in travel and everything just fine. So
And there's also, the national holidays, and Japan has a lot of those. There's like what, Green Day, Ocean Day,
Mountain Day,
Mountain Day.
Girls Day, Children's Day, Elderly People Day, lots of public holidays. And they typically fall on a Monday or a Tuesday. So you can easily make a long weekend out of it as well, which is really nice.
Let's see. Move on to the next slide. Everyone gets the same salary when they're over there on JET. So your first year, you get 3.36 million yen. Exchange rates, go up and down, but you're generally talking between $30,000 and $33,000 in US dollars with that salary. It goes up each year for the first 4 years. So that's fairly, as I recall, when I was over there, I saved a fair bit of money. I lived frugally, but I could have lived even, more comfortably and saved less money. But you can still get by just fine out. Is that your experience, Claire?
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of places, you'll have your living expenses are not as expensive as they would be, living in the United States, just because potentially you might have subsidized housing. I have found that like, if you have to buy a car, if you buy a used car, it's much cheaper here to buy a used car than in the United States. So yeah, I would agree. I think that if you want to save money, or if you're like working to pay off student loans or things like that, you can do so quite easily while still, living comfortably.
I will say I got a direct message from someone in the call that is thinking about coming over, I guess, with a family. It's possible and people do it. But obviously, while this salary is fine to live quite comfortably as a single person, it would be possible, but it would be pretty tight to try and support an entire family on this salary.
I think so.
So definitely something to keep in mind. I know some Jets who went over with, for instance, a spouse. If you're bringing a spouse over, as long as you indicate that on the application itself, so the contracting organization knows what they're agreeing to, they'll sponsor your spouse. They'll sponsor your children as dependents, so they'll be able to come over on a dependent visa. Obviously, kids can't work, but a spouse can get an additional little amendment to their visa that allows them to work part-time while they're over there in Japan. Now, in addition to the salary, there is transportation to and from Japan. So if you're applying through Nashville, we have you covered from Nashville all the way to wherever it is that you're living in Japan, to Kagawa, to Hokkaido, not Hokkaido, Hiroshima. We also have, once you finish your time on JET, whether it's 1 or 5 years in the future, we've got you covered coming back. And you're also enrolled in the National Health Insurance Program, which I thankfully didn't have to deal with really much at all myself. But from what I hear from people who do, it's pretty good. Like,
yeah, I think so. I've been it's really easy. It's really nice. So I will miss it.
I saw someone from the 2019 group posted on Facebook about how she had like full on surgery and was only out of pocket like $100.
Yeah.
So it's a lot nicer than
drastically different.
Most of us get to live with over here in the US.
Drastically different.
Now, as far as living situations go, we're sending, in a normal year, we're sending about 2,000 people worldwide on the JET program, about 1,000 Americans. They're living throughout the country of Japan, so there's a lot of variation in the living experiences that people find themselves in. What the JET program, the contracting organization, is obligated to do is to assist you with finding independent housing. Someone asked in the chat whether you can do a shared house, like group housing. That is possible. I know a couple, well, actually, I only know one person who's done it without like a spouse, like with a friend. And that was just something that they had kind of arranged on their own. Otherwise, unless you go out of your way to try and have group living, you're going to have your own place, your own independent apartment. In some cases, it's provided by the contracting organization. So is that your experience, Claire?
My high school owns my house.
And it was the same for me. I'm not sure if my town owned my apartment or just had a very long-term lease, but I was the 5th generation of JET to live in that apartment.
Yeah.
So the benefit, it's like subsidized housing, basically, in a lot of cases. The downside,
it's like that.
It's like probably full. Was your place full of your predecessor stuff? And
yeah, I found a book from 1998 in here.
Right on. Yeah, sometimes things just kind of
compile. Handbook from 1998.
It's also, I think, getting ever more common these days that instead of having that teacher housing, what they'll do is just connect you with a realtor who will help you find an apartment.
Yes.
And in that case, you're generally more or less on the hook for the cost, the upkeep of the apartment.
More expensive, I think.
But the contracting organization is helping like co-sponsor you, so you're actually able to get an apartment. Without a sponsor, it can be pretty hard as a foreigner to get an apartment over there.
Yeah, very, yeah.
You'll get a chance to connect with Jets from all over the world. I still have friends all over the world that I made on the JET program. I'm sure, Claire, you've got a bunch of international friends these days too.
Yeah, definitely. One of the best parts of this job, I think.
And you'll also obviously get a chance to connect with the local community. You're living there in Japan. And you get a guaranteed adventure, I think, regardless of what you get.
Sure. Definitely, yeah.
Did I skip one? Okay, there we go. We do have most Jets get placed in smaller cities and towns, but we do also put people in major cities. When you apply to the JET program, you can list preferences. So for anyone who started the application, you get to list 3 placement preferences, places you'd like to live. The important thing to keep in mind with the JET program, though, is that with the JET program, you are applying to live in Japan. You're not applying to live in a very specific place in Japan. So when you apply, you need to do so with the willingness to live anywhere, to live wherever you're assigned. In my experience, kind of talking to the Jets I've sent, it seems like if you list a placement preference, you got maybe a 50% chance of getting that placement preference. So it's definitely worth listing something if there's a place that you want to live. But do keep in mind that you could be placed in an entirely different part of the world. One of my friends, apparently all she wrote for placement preference was south of Tokyo, like anything south of Tokyo. She doesn't like the cold, and they put her up in Aomori, so just the northernmost tip of the main island of Honshu. So you got to have some flexibility. In my case, I requested Ehime Prefecture because I'd done a summer host family study abroad there in high school, and they put me in Kagawa, which was right next door, so pretty close, pretty good, I would think, in the grand scheme of things. Claire, did you, I forget, did you request anything?
No, I didn't. I was good to go anywhere. But I will say in my interview, I don't know if this was luck or if you guys listened, but I did say that I would love to live in the mountains, and that's where I live. And that was just a statement I made in my interview. So I don't know if that was taken into account or what, but I've been very happy with my placement, and I know most people are. So
I will say we do listen, and there's also a solid element of luck. So
I wondered, I wasn't sure, but I did say it in my interview that I loved the mountains. I would like to be in the mountains to hike and things, and I ended up in a pretty solid location for that. So
and I think you're also, if you're asking for the mountains in Japan or like be near the ocean in Japan, those are kind of the two, like they got plenty of mountains and plenty of ocean. So
yeah. So if you want a beach or you want mountains, like chances are high you will get that.
Someone else has asked, like on the application, when you're filling out your listing placement preferences, there is a place where you can list why you want to be in a specific place. And that can help. I think that the more, compelling of a reason for wanting to live in a place, for instance, if there's a strong sister city relationship, if your hometown or where you're going to college has a sister city relationship with that area in Japan, then that's something that they really take into account. If you have a family member in that particular area, that's something that they take into account. If it's just that you read a book that was set there and you'd really like to live there, then definitely go ahead and list that. It's not going to hurt you. It's actually possibly during the interview, that's going to be like something that one of your interviewers will want to hone in on and ask you about the book. And, it'll be a chance to connect with an interviewer. But that, may not sway placements that much. Now, as far as the application process goes, the base requirements to apply through the JET program USA here at the US, you have to have US citizenship. If you're not American, you just need to apply through the embassy, Japanese embassy in whatever country you have citizenship. You'll need a bachelor's degree by, I believe it's June 23rd or 24th is what they're saying this year, 2022, if you're going to start this year. If you're not applying this year, if you're going to graduate in 2023, just wait until next fall to apply. Good mental and physical health, whole slew of things kind of related to having not spent too much time in Japan or on the JET program, which probably don't apply to anyone on this call. Excellent written verbal English skills, and then a strong interest in Japan and Japanese culture. So those are the base eligibility requirements. Japanese language ability is preferred, I think, for an ALT, but as we've just discussed, it's by no means required. For the CIR position, though, it is by all means required. You need to have really solid Japanese. As far as the attributes that make a great JET, and I will say, guys, if you're planning to apply, feel free to do a screenshot or jot some of these keywords down. These are attributes that we like to see in the application, in the interview. So definitely something to keep in mind. I think that they're all pretty obvious when you think about it, when you think about the program as we've described it. Adaptable, patient, flexible, positive attitude, good sense of humor. I would say all of these come in pretty key when you're over there in Japan. Would you agree, Claire?
Yep, definitely.
I think particularly that adaptability, because you don't really know where you're going. You don't really know what, and even if you think you know where you're going, you're going to get there and it's going to be different than you expected.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And patience. You, I have learned a lot. I have definitely learned patience since being here. Just, not in a negative way, not in a bad way. It's just, something that comes with. I had never left the United States before I moved to Japan, so it was a huge learning curve for me.
And yeah, and the Japanese way of doing things is a bit more
It's different.
methodical and group thinky as well. So it's you can't always get that quick answer that you want.
Very different from, American work culture and just social culture, just everything. It's very different, yeah.
Also, a passion for education and cross-cultural exchange. One would assume that's pretty obvious in an exchange program, and a genuine interest in Japan. Again, this is a Japanese taxpayer-funded program. It's quite expensive for them to bring you guys over there, and so they want to see that the folks that they're bringing over, the people that they're investing in, really do have an interest in Japan. As far as the application timeline goes, this year's application is open now. For anyone who's not applying this year, the timeline's pretty much the same every year. Generally late September, the application goes live. It stays up until mid-November. So Friday, November 12th is the deadline this year. Once the application is in, on the embassy side in DC, they'll do an initial screening and they'll basically decide who gets an interview. And only around half of the people in a normal year who apply to the JET program actually get invited to the interview. So I think it's pretty important. This is really, I think, that the first and the biggest hurdle that you want to overcome is to make sure that you put together a good application to get that interview, which means not waiting until the last minute, not trying to do it all in one go. Keep in mind that if you log into the application website and you start it, you'll see, you need reference letters, you need transcripts. There's all kinds of stuff that you got to collect that takes some time. So make sure that, you take the time and that you do it right. You'll find out in January whether or not you've gotten an interview. The interviews will take place in early February. In a normal year, the interviews are in person. You have to physically come to your interview location. If you're applying through Nashville, anyone in Kentucky almost certainly be applying through Nashville. You need to come to us to do the in-person interview. Last year, because of the pandemic, we actually did fully remote interviews. This year, it's still a bit of a question mark. Tokyo wants us to do in-person interviews, but if there's another flare-up of the pandemic, we might be doing remote. We probably won't know for sure until January. So just when you apply, know that there is a decent chance that you might need to physically come to Nashville for that interview. In April, you'll find out whether or not you were successful. Basically, you'll be told that you were successful, you're on the waiting list, or you weren't successful. Then in early summer, you'll find out where you're going to be in Japan. And then in late July, you'll actually leave for Japan. So it's kind of an interesting timeline. I don't know if this stressed you out at all, Claire. I know a lot of people get a little stressed that you find out whether you're successful or not in April, and then you get 2 weeks to decide whether or not you're going to accept. So you're accepting before you know where you're going to live in Japan, which is a little bit spooky, isn't it?
Yeah. I guess if you really have a place that you really want to go to, maybe those 2 weeks are really stressful. I personally knew that if I was offered, I was accepting. The placement wasn't so important for me, but everything that happened before April, I was just a stress bucket. just to be honest and put it out there, it was stressful, but it was all worth it. And I mean, as anything you want will be, it will be stressful. It's a long application, and it's a long wait for the interview, and then after the interview. So I mean, it's just like any other job, I think, but this one's just longer in figuring out if you're gonna actually be successful or not.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it helps for current students because you're still in school. Or if you've got a job that you're in and you're fine sticking out for the job for another year or whatever. I applied the year after I graduated. So I was just working part-time for my cousin's construction company on the assumption I was going to get in. But if I hadn't gotten in, then that would have set me back a little bit because I'd have to come up with a new plan.
Yep, me too. I was just waiting to get to Japan. That was my year in between graduation and coming to Japan. I was just doing things to get here. And so I was ready to come immediately in April when they said, you got the job. I was like, let's go tomorrow. So.
See, these days the application is all online. So Claire got to experience that. I think it's been since 2018 that it's been totally digital. You log on to the website, jetprogramusa.org, start an application in the portal, and then start downloading or uploading your documents and filling out all the different sections that you need to fill out. Back in my day, everything was in paper and it had to be mailed in triplicate. It was just a whole different thing, but you guys don't have to deal with that. So congratulations. The future is now. If when you're filling out your application, you have any sort of issues with the application portal or questions specific to the application, the best way to get an answer on those things is to go through something called the JET inbox. You'll see it at the very bottom of the page. And that sends a message directly to the portal administrators. My contact information will be on the last slide. So you guys will have that too. If you've got questions about the interviews or general questions about the JET program that you can't find an answer to in the application or in the frequently asked questions section of the website. But if you reach out to me about some tech issue with the application, all I can do is email the people at the embassy, and then you just put one more, layer between you and the answer that you want. So just go through that JET inbox if you need something. As far as helpful hints, and this is, I believe, the second to last slide here. Like I said, only about half the people who are filling out an application are going to get an interview. So you want to make sure that you take the time to fill out that application thoroughly. Read all the instructions carefully. There's frequently asked questions pages. There's loads of information out there. Just spend a bit of time reading the fine print, making sure that you're filling everything out like you're supposed to. Make sure that everything you're supposed to upload. For instance, you need to provide proof of U.S. citizenship. That can either be a scan of your passport or a scan of your birth certificate, a couple other little things, a green card. Every year there's somebody who uploads a scan that is so blurry, so pixelated that you can't read the thing. Well, if you've uploaded that and submitted it with your application, it's marked down as an incomplete application because they can't read the document that you've uploaded. So make sure that everything that you upload is legible. When you're filling out the application, there's they like to do things in threes. So international experience, intercultural experience, 3 things that you can list. Work experience, 3 things that you can list. Formal teaching experience, informal teaching experience, it's kind of 3 of each. When they're deciding who gets the interview, there's a rubric, they're going through, they're ranking everybody, and everything that you're putting on this application is hypothetically something that could help you get the points, perform well enough to get over that hump to get offered the interview. So as much as possible, try to fill in those boxes. Now, nobody fills in all of those boxes. Don't make things up, obviously, don't lie. But if, for instance, in Claire's case, you'd never been out of the country, you said? Is that right? So international, intercultural experience, did you put anything in any of those boxes?
Yeah, I think that whenever I went through, so my last year of college, I was really active, like teaching English in the International Center at my university. So I was able to put that down for like intercultural experience.
Mm-hmm.
But it was very brief. My box for that was obviously very brief, but I did, I was able to put down, like, I had volunteered at a culture festival. I put that down as well. So those were the only like two things I think that I was really able to put in it though. And I don't know, maybe that was a stretch, but it was kind of like.
And it doesn't hurt. One year somebody put like a trip to Epcot Center for intercultural experience, which was, it didn't help him. I don't know. It didn't really hurt him. I got a good chuckle out of it. I don't think it hurt him. He got on the JET program in the end.
You're not going to take points away, I don't guess.
Yeah, it's a little cheeky. So, in general, I wouldn't stretch it that far, but if you're volunteering at an intercultural festival, then if you don't have a lot of international experience, that's definitely something that you could list there.
Yeah. If you have the experience, like, definitely it would go further, but I was, stretching for things to, what can I put here? What can I show? I'm trying.
There's also, on the most important part of the application is going to be that essay, the statement of purpose that you got to fill out. It's 2 pages long. You want to use those 2 pages to really sell yourself. Someone asked me recently what the, if there was some sort of golden key or some secret to writing a good statement of purpose. And I think it's kind of a silly question, because if you go to write the statement of purpose, look up near the top of it. It gives you a prompt. It tells you what they want you to answer in that statement of purpose. So right there's your golden key. That's the thing that you need to do a good statement of purpose. So just make sure that when you write it, obviously spell check, have a friend or someone at your university writing center or professor look over it, give you advice. The first draft should never be the last draft, but also make sure that you're thoroughly answering the questions. And basically off the top of my head, I believe it's like, why do you want to go to Japan on the JET program? And in what position? What experiences have you had in your life that are going to make you a good JET? How do you plan to engage with the local community and the international community? And how does this JET program experience kind of fit into your grander career life scheme? So make sure that you're answering every single one of those things in those 2 pages. Proofread the application, submit everything, obviously before the deadline. There's no real benefit. You're not going to be viewed better by submitting your application today than you will 3 weeks from now. But it takes some time to get everything together. So don't wait until the last minute, because one little thing being late could derail you. And if you submit on or after the 13th of November, then it's an invalid application. In fact, I think that they shut down the application portal, so you can't even submit. And then, make sure that you upload all the documents that need to be uploaded. Claire, do you have any other tips or suggestions?
Yeah, definitely just have people proofread your essay. I printed it out and gave copies to a professor. I gave a copy to my dad. I got as many, my best friend proofread my essay. So, all the eyes that you can get to look at it, with different perspectives also, are I think a good idea. So yeah, definitely just as many eyes on your essay as you can, I think, is the important thing.
See, I'll do one last slide here. The photo there at the top, that includes Claire. That's her cohort that left Nashville in the beginning of August 2019.
Yep.
Do you see yourself in there?
Yeah, I'm in the middle. Yeah, I'm in the middle. My head's kind of covered up. So you might not be able to see.
This was actually the largest group that we've ever sent out of Nashville. 2020, we were set to have another similarly sized group. COVID's gotten in the way of things a little bit. I'll get into that in a second, but At least back in the day. I mean, this was pretty cool, right? It was the consul general opened up his private residence, had a big cocktail reception. This was the night before you guys all flew over. Do you remember anything about that night?
Yeah, I mean, that whole, we had orientation before this as well. I remember I was nervous, but I mean it was a good time. It was lots of fun. I got to talk to a bunch of people and it was really hot. Obviously, it was August. um After this day though, the next like 2 or 3 days they blur. I could not tell you many specific details from this picture being taken until, orientation really started in Tokyo.
The jet lag hadn't kicked in during this photo, but
It hadn't started yet. Then I got to Tokyo, and at 3 a.m. when I was supposed to be asleep because I had orientation at 7 a.m., I was just like, I'm not on this time zone. Where am I? There are still times where I wake up and I'm just like, where do I live? But especially at that point in time.
But yeah, so this was the last group that we've sent out of Nashville as of right now. Basically, the 2020 group, because the pandemic wound up getting postponed all the way into 2021. And over the course of this fall, we've been sending basically all the jets from around the world over to Japan in small groups. Everyone has to do a 14-day quarantine when they get to Japan. So it's meant that instead of bringing over 1,000 people per weekend over the course of 2 weekends, we've got to separate it a lot finer. So the group out of Nashville, the combined 2020 and 2021 jets are scheduled to leave on November 6th. So basically what this is October 6th here in the US. So 1 month from today, more or less, we'll be getting all those guys on the airplane. But, it has been obviously a little bit of a hurdle. We're hopeful that this coming year is going to look a lot more normal. It's probably not going to look entirely normal for our 2022 applicants. Hopefully by 2023, 2024, everything gets back to normal. And at least 2022 should look a lot more normal than it has the last 2 years. What's it been like, by the way, Claire, over there in Japan? Basically, as I understand it, like because the jets haven't been able to get there for a year and a half.
A lot
of schools
don't have ALTs, or
Yeah.
they've really just then. I am kind of lucky. I've not had to really go to other schools just because of my location. There's no other schools for me to go to. But I do have some friends, like especially those that live in the city center who can like take public transportation to get places. Their school, because of the pandemic, since there's no ALTs there, they might be visiting a school once or twice a month that like is like an hour and a half train ride away from them. That's not typical though. Like, don't think that that's going to be your visit school. This is just like how our Board of Education is dealing with the scarcity of ALTs. So they've been like trying to spread ALTs out more so, I think. But
yeah, it's tricky because no one's been able to get in for up until the summer, basically.
Yeah, my school last year was very nervous that I would be leaving because they knew if I left, there was no one coming to replace me. So, they were very excited when I decided to stay. Maybe it's because I'm a good ALT. Maybe it's because they weren't going to get a replacement. Either way, it was kind of nice for them to be like, oh, thank God you're staying.
Like, I would like a party, please.
Yeah. Prove to me that you're happy. Yeah, no.
Can you put my name on a plaque in front of this room?
The ALT that stayed throughout the pandemic. So no, yeah. But that's how they've kind of dealt with it, spreading people out a little bit more so than they normally would. That's not the norm though. It wouldn't be likely in you guys' case for it to be like that.
Now, in a minute, I'll open it up just to some general questions. First, just to point out, we've got our website on there, jetprogramusa.org. That's my email address, jet@nb.mofa.go.jp. You can also follow us if you're not already on Facebook, the official JET Program USA Facebook page. And our office, the Consulate General of Japan in Nashville, has an Instagram account. Japan in Nashville. Encourage you guys, if you're on Instagram, to go ahead and follow us. One of my coworkers, who is a fellow JET alumni, is in charge of all the social media content. She's always working pretty hard on, so I'm sure she would love that support. And a lot of the stuff is pretty interesting and relevant to folks in Tennessee and Kentucky. So with that, I will actually stop the recording and then just go to general questions.